Right. Well, we have the Chief Secretary with us this morning as we discuss finances. Now, Tobago has just gotten away, as the old people say, by the skin of our teeth. We get away by the skin of our teeth from Hurricane Beryl. But we have to press forward. Before the hurricane came, the conversation was about the budget as the budget was presented last week. And we are continuing in that very same vein. So I'm going to go with you first, Secretary, as we are discussing your new role as Finance Secretary. Tell us about this appointment. For you, what does this mean for you, and what does it mean for your family now that you move from public servant to sitting secretary?
Well, thank you for having me this morning, and it's an honor and a privilege to speak to you and speak to Tobago and the world at large on this very elevated appointment. For me, it is a privilege to serve. As I've always said, I've always been willing, enthusiastic. But this takes it up a notch, because rather than doing the work, because I was the person who would execute, it's now to set the policies. And I believe I'm best fit because of the fact that culturally, I understand the organization, I understand the people, I understand the needs of the Assembly, I understand how the Tobago House of Assembly operates. I've been in spaces among people who, before me, managed the Tobago House of Assembly. And I always thought that there are ways that my style and things that have worked before can be implemented to make Tobago the greatest little island on the planet. For my family, when I was approached, I said, I have to speak to my family first and foremost, and I got the support. That is important for me, as I was just letting you know that after the interview, I'll have to take my little son to school. So, it doesn't end there, but I think life is about balance. It's about compartmentalizing your life and ensuring that you manage it in a way that you get the best out of life, career-wise, family-wise, social-wise, and as you just asked me about going to the gym, I'll have to start to try to exercise.
Yes, and
so that there's a great balance.
Right.
So basically that is it for me, but I really would like to see the Tobago House of Assembly and Tobago advance at another level, and I think that this is the pivot for the island.
Right. And Chief Secretary Farley Augustine, you have taken a back seat this morning let petals shine, and we really appreciate that, because as Tobagonians looking on, seeing a female Secretary for Finance for the first time, it sets a high precedent, not only for women, but for youth, right? Because Petal, you represent youth, you represent, that modern woman, and it is encouraging to young women in Tobago that, it's not necessary that you have to be politically aligned, but as long as you are great at what you do, regardless of any side of the political divide, once they are able to see talent, they will be able to bring you on board and appreciate that talent. So, Chief, tell us about that, thrust towards bringing on the competent and willing, as opposed to just looking for someone that was in your team who was already politically associated. We bought someone, I see that you bought someone on who is apolitical, and how does that work for the team?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic and a first for Tobago in many ways. Usually, the executive is filled by diehards, quote unquote. And when I started this journey as Chief Secretary and Secretary of Finance, I always knew that it would be a long-term arrangement, because in all honesty, it's not very practical for a Chief Secretary to also be Secretary of Finance for a very long period in time. Mr. Charles did it for the duration of his tenure. Kudos to him. Mr. London did it at the beginning of his tenure, and then he brought on Mr. London, his cousin, as a councillor. And so, as I looked across the space, there were options, several options. But I wanted someone who was going to move from the institution itself because I wanted that sort of institutional knowledge to be brought to bear on the portfolio, as opposed to just the political aspect of it. When I campaigned to be Chief Secretary, I promised Tobagonians that I am going to seek out the competent and the willing, create a coalition of the competent and the willing, and through that, design a government that accepts talent from anywhere. So even in the team I led into the election, we had persons who were initially PNM, persons who were initially Tobago forwards, persons who came into this as PDP, persons who was fiercely independent as we created a team that ran for the election. And I feel that should carry on even into governance. Secretary Roberts, I think, is one of our brightest minds on the island. I am, through Secretary Roberts, I'm able to inspire young girls everywhere on the island, including my own daughter, because I am raising a daughter, and I have to raise a daughter in a world that appreciates that women leadership has something unique and important to bring in terms of this society's development. And I wish to endorse and support that. But more than that, I needed to also hand over finance to someone that I wouldn't need to worry about and about the decisions that they make. Someone whose moral compass is not broken and who is God-fearing and has integrity. And I think those are key attributes to being a good Secretary of Finance. And I'm happy that Secretary Roberts can be the first female Secretary of Finance. I think she is deserving of that. I think her parents, her husband and children, her school, her alma mater, I think they should be proud, justly proud. Also, I made a point in the House that for the very first time in the history of this country, we have an executive where the majority of the members are women. For the very first time. And I think that is a sign of how progressive we are in the TPP, how progressive we are as a government in pushing the envelope and going where others fear to tread, in ensuring that Tobago makes its mark. And I'm happy that Hurricane Beryl did not destroy Tobago. I've seen what it has done to the other islands. I certainly prayed against it, and I'm happy that this is not Secretary Roberts' first activity or line of business. Granted that she has been instrumental even before now in managing the finances around the oil spill cleanup. Most persons won't know that. She was very instrumental in managing that. And just before coming to this position, she was also leading a team that was creating for us a contract registry across the T.H.A, because we very much intend on having online a system where you could just simply plug in the name of any contractor and see what contract the T.H.A would have awarded that person and what's the value and all of that in terms of transparency. And she was the one who also spearheaded the e-tender and EPSIP projects for the Tobago House of Assembly. And you know that by the time we get to the end of July, all of our tendering processes will be electronic and no longer paper-based. That is as a result of the work of our new Secretary of Finance. So she was already heavily involved in helping to shape the fiscal space in Tobago, and now she's able to do so move from an executing position, as she pointed out, to one that can set the policy direction for the entire Tobago House of Assembly to follow.
Right, and as we are still in that hurricane season, because Hurricane Beryl is still heading over to Cayman Islands, still heading over to Jamaica. The people want to know, what is Tobago doing currently to assist with our neighbors within the region?
Oh, well, later today, post-executive council, we will announce the coordinating team that will coordinate the response. We have Director Stewart, who will lead that coordinating team. And essentially, we are going to corral Tobagonians to give and give generously to our family in Grenada, in particular Carriacou, Petit Martinique, and of course out there in St. Vincent through Union Island. I saw where the Prime Minister of Grenada indicated that about 92% of all properties in Carriacou either damaged or completely destroyed. That's a staggering amount for a country that experienced Hurricane Ivan not so long ago. It is a massive setback, and I want Tobagonians to not see themselves as just being lucky. I don't want Tobagonians to see this from an arrogant perspective that God resides here, but I want them to appreciate the mercies of God. I want Tobagonians to appreciate that we might have gotten away this time, but this might just have been dress rehearsal for the next time, and that we ought to remain vigilant. And when we say, look, a hurricane is coming, these are the steps you take, that we ought to be vigilant and adhere to those instructions. We shouldn't be liming and trying to fish out a boat in the day of a hurricane and so on. We should be vigilant and prepared always. So we are going to give back at the Executive Council today. This is our first Exec Council meeting since Beryl passed. So at the Exec Council today, we'll discuss how else we can give. But I wouldn't want to take the liberty of going into great details without having the benefit of the Exec Council's approval policy-wise. That would be improper. But we certainly should give. And I've heard the stories from the elders who have spoken about the fact I spoke to someone recently and they said, look, right there in Bloody Bay, boats came in with roasted breadfruit from Grenada, post-Hurricane Flora. They just were the first to give, and so Tobagonians feel a sense of gratitude, and they paid it forward, so to speak, and it's time for us to give back to them. So just be on alert, Tobagonians. Listen out for the announcement later today. And let's be willing to give as much as we can to assist our family. And I call them family, not just neighbors, but our family members in Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
All right. Well, you heard it here, guys. You stay tuned. Later today, we're going to hear more about what Tobago is doing to help our neighbors. But before we get into further conversations this morning, let's take a quick break and we'll be back right after this. Good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. As you know, or if you are just joining us, we have been chatting with the Honorable Farley Chavez Augustine, our Chief Secretary, as well as the newly appointed Secretary for Finance, Mrs. Petal-Roberts. Good morning and welcome back, guys. Before we left off to the break, we were talking about the announcement of exactly what Tobago is going to be doing to help with our neighbors in this hurricane season, especially with Hurricane Beryl just passing through. But we can't talk about helping our neighbors without talking about helping our locals. Because obviously there are going to be persons watching who saying, okay, we're going to be helping Grenada and helping this one, but look, my roof blew off, and look, this, that, and the other. So the question is, what is going to be done from the T.H.A's side for persons who experience devastation from Hurricane Beryl locally?
Let me talk about the actions, and Secretary Roberts will talk about funding arrangements and which divisions will organize accordingly. So already, well, we have been collecting reports through T.H.A, which is pretty standard, and most of the reports, most of the damage is really roof related, and so already Tobago Assembly has been acquiring roofing materials, and there is a team with settlements that has a roofing program, the engineers from Works and the Defense Force labor. And they have been going and systematically repairing roofs across the island. In some cases, it might be 2 sheets. Some cases, the sheets are good and they just need to be reattached. Some cases, the sheets have to be replaced, rafters replaced. So they are doing that because, as you realize, we have rainfall today. We expect rainfall again on Friday. We have a weather system that's coming. We're seeing one developing east of us again. And I want Tobagonians to know that we will be doing this pretty frequently during this Atlantic hurricane season. So we deal with the roofs on one end. The Defense Force, they have also been out. They have been clearing trees, clearing roadways, trees that have fallen on buildings. They're clearing all of those, and that's being done. We had only about 5 reports of floods to homes. So that cleanup activity is perhaps already completed by now. We are also providing food vouchers for those affected. About 5 families had to be completely relocated. And in those instances, we are covering the rental accommodation for those. The first 72 hours is taken care of by T.H.A, and thereafter the Division of Health, through their department, Social Protection Department, they will take over and manage the rent. The rent is up to 3 months in the first instance, but can be extended. And then, of course, that division will provide the food cards to allow persons to purchase grocery stuff for babies, as the case may be. So we are taking care of our own in that regard. Again, just to point out before the Secretary comes in, every time we have a natural disaster, there is an opportunity cost. Natural or man-made disaster, there's an opportunity cost. And while in our budgetary allocation, we do budget for the work of T.H.A, you could never really and truly budget for a disaster. I've heard the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, Gonzalez, estimating that it's up over $100 million to cover their expenses from the hurricane there. I mean, that's a staggering amount if you think about it. And that might be over 100 million US. So that's a staggering amount. That's double the T.H.A's capital development budget in a single year. Well, more than that, given that we barely getting 300 million these days in capital development. And the TT dollar against the US kind of weak these days. So there's more than double our capital development budget in a single year. And so there is a cost to climate change that I want Tobagonians to be appreciative of. And that's why I supported the decision and joined Minister Penelope Beckers in signing on for blue carbon credits and looking at trade-offs and how we manage that. That's why when we say don't cut down the forest, it's important. That's why when we try to prevent people from cutting down the mangroves, it's important because these provide natural protection. Without them, we will spend a lot more money responding to natural disasters.
Okay, and Secretary Roberts, there isn't a disaster relief fund, is there?
No, there's no disaster relief fund, but managing any disaster, any unfortunate, any extraordinary expenditure, we have one vote. However, there are several votes specific to each division. For instance, as the Chief Secretary mentioned, Health will provide support in terms of food cards, in terms of rental of accommodation. The Division of Settlements will give support in terms of housing and that kind of thing. But I really want to give my commitment as Secretary of Finance to let the public know that, as the Chief Secretary said, there is an opportunity cost, but we will make funding available to give support in times of this need. Also, what I will commit to also do, if persons are not sure where to go, through T.H.A and the Office of the Chief Secretary, I will give the information in terms of what type of support should be accommodated in which division, so that persons will know where they should go or be directed to which division if they need that kind of support.
Right, and we know that currently the Division of Settlements, they have a program in partnership with Habitat for Humanity where they are doing the roof repairs. But right, can we see an injection or allocation into that vault because of the circumstances surrounding the hurricane?
Most definitely, and that's how, you know, managing finances are. In your personal life, sometimes you have to shift resources according to the circumstance. So because of the circumstance, as Secretary of Finance, I am committed to giving the support in whatever areas that is needed. However, I must say as well, if I'm giving support in that area, it may mean that, you know, in another area, that is very discretionary may have to suffer, the loss because of the injection into the support because of Beryl. And going forward, this is the hurricane season, we will see that kind of management of the funds of the Tobago House of Assembly because of the fact we have to manage in times of circumstance.
Right. And moving forward, would it be a point of business for you to get an emergency fund established?
We do have a contingency fund where we try to put funding from unspent into, and it is for these types of reasons. However, the fund only started last year. So you can imagine it's not much funding. As a matter of fact, that's where we would have funded part of the oil spill, only 15 million. And at this time, the fund has gone down bare bones. So for the last fiscal, we have to look at the available unspent, because according to the Executive Council, there's a percentage of unspent that must go to contingency at the end of any fiscal period. So we're going to look at that, and that's one of my first order of business as well. As a matter of fact, today when I go back to finance, it will be looking at the financial status of this assembly and treating with this emergency and anything that is to come, how we're going to respond.
Additionally, during our last conversation, I would have stated, based on conversations that were happening in the space and the presentation that was made by Senator Hislop in the Parliament, that he indicated that he was okay with the 50 million. But then he later came and indicated that more monies would be allocated to Tobago for the oil spill cleanup. Now, I want to hear from yourself and the Chief Secretary. Can we take his word for it in regards to more money being allocated, or does he even have the authority to make such a statement on behalf of the Minister for Finance that more money would be given to Tobago for the oil spill cleanup?
I can't respond to if he has the authority. I'll tell you the facts. We have not yet received the $50 million. And so in light of that, I don't know if we can really hold our breaths and say we're going to get more. So I don't know if he has the authority. I don't know where he gets his information from. But the fact of the matter is, to Tobago, the T.H.A. has not yet received the 50 million. And therefore, I have contractors still, as the Chief Secretary did mention to you, that I managed on the multidisciplinary team, the finances of the oil spill. Contractors, up to last night, I had an email from a contractor asking me, when can I receive the rest of the payments? So I don't know where he's getting his information from, who is feeding him, but I'm going to give the facts that we have not yet received, and I don't know if we will receive any other funding. However, as Secretary of Finance, I intend to write the Minister of Finance as well through the Chief Secretary to see what the status of the funds really is.
But do you believe that Tobago would be getting more money, as he indicated?
Well, I don't know. Well, as I said, I'd have to have a conversation, but I feel through the IOPC, we should have, based on the claims that were made in terms of the oil spill, so I am hopeful that we will receive more than the 50 going forward.
Chief Secretary.
Well, I seldom believe anything Senator Lawrence says. I'll be more bold and frank in my statement. When we submitted the claim, they made a big brouhaha saying, well, we only saw receipts for 50 million and they won 150 something million. Also that nonsense. If they were honest with Tobagonians and the country in the first place, then they would have said, look, the midterm review came in the middle of the cleanup operations. The receipts or the invoices you would have seen would be up to the point of making the request, but the cleanup continued even after making the request. And so the rest of what was requested will be based on projections, based on what was spent so far. No consideration even for the waste removal, and that's of huge concern to me, and should be of huge concern to Tobagonians, especially with this amount of rainfall. Before Hurricane Beryl, we had a weather system, a trough that brought upon the island between 50 and 100 millimeters of rainfall based on where you were on the island. Oil and water doesn't mix, and not only that they don't mix, but when water meets oil, what happens with oil? It floats. And what we don't want is that those cells which were well constructed, that they overflow their banks and that we have leaching happening and create another ecological disaster. That wasn't even catered for in the allocation. But as the Secretary said, we went to ITOF as a country. When the Minister of Energy went to ITOF to make the claim, we were not party to those conversations. We were not a part of the contingent. We weren't invited. We didn't even know that they were going, but they went. Then a report came. They came up with a report that we will get somewhere between 20 and 30 million US that they estimate that we will get. Then I saw that they had a meeting in Trinidad to discuss the matter. The T.H.A again was never invited to that meeting. We only saw it in the paper that they met to discuss the claims in Trinidad. We never party to that conversation, but I really hope that in this instance that they will appreciate that there is a need beyond the 50 million to fund the cleanup operations, because the truth is it was never budgeted for. It was never allocated for, and there is an opportunity cost, and the trade-off is paying for all of that and not doing capital development works. And I want to be honest, understand, every time there's an oil spill, a hurricane, flood, landslides, then it means that that's one less road we could pave. Less money is going to school pay, and less money is for students going out to study. That's also a development vote across education data. Less money is on building our beach facilities and improving tourism plans, because we now have to shift the monies from where they were originally located to treat with those development items. So that's just something to be understood by all, and for one to appreciate is not different from when you run your household, because as you're managing a household for the year, you didn't plan for piece of roof to blow off, but you had to take the monies that you were going to use to add on a bathroom and now go down by Almando's or Singer or one of those hardware, or Dave and Daughters up in Space that and buy some galvanized sheets and maybe some lantern thing, because you just have to. That's just the way the government also runs. That as things happen, is a fluid kind of operation, and as things happen, you have to shift priorities ever so often. And we just do what we have to do and to ensure that Tobagonians keep safe and as comfortable as possible.
Right, and you guys have that executive council briefing this evening?
Yes, so post-exec council meeting, then we have our briefing.
Right. What is the priority moving forward post-hurricane for Tobago?
Well, we have a list of priorities. So coming up, we have school repair. During this July-August period, school is closing on Friday, and then some school repairs will kick in. And of course, given that we have had the single largest spend on school repair for any government in the history of the T.H.A, we feel that in this July-August that we could do away with just simply focusing on what is absolutely necessary to be done in our schools. Secondly, we have some repair works to be done in tourism. The Bloody Bay Beach facility, the Blue Food facility, finishing up on lifeguard boots to be done. We also look at across in food security. They have started the process with the mega farm and with T.H.A and their vet lab. So those are going to move to the next phase, as well as one fishing depot, the one in Palativale, move to the second phase. Then when we go to health, they are acquiring some imaging machinery, as well as they have already ordered ambulances. So we should see those coming through the system, and Roxbury is moving to 24 hours over the next 2 months in a phase basis, and while they're going through the external checks and so on to ensure that everything is being done as per requirements for accreditation. We also, if we go to works infrastructure, they have already purchased equipment, so those equipment should arrive, and that's equipment for paving and patching of roads, so those should arrive. And so the patching gangs internally will be able to do a lot of the road repairs themselves instead of having to tender it out for external contracts, which is much more costly. So they will focus on that, and of course the completion of the Dr. Maury Boulevard, which runs through the Friendship Estate down to Crown Point. That should be completed as well before we end the fiscal year. Under the Office of the Chief Secretary, we should see the starting up of the Department of Safety and Security. We have done all the feasibility work. We had former ACP nurse do a wonderful assessment for us in terms of how we can work. I know he's also a lawyer by profession. We look at the legalities around the matter, structure and all of that. So we did all of the groundwork. Now we're looking to get started. And of course, we should completely move into the H.A. Charles Administrative Complex because some departments are still moving in. Also, the CERT building in Speyside should be handed over to the public in the next couple of months. So quite a number of things are happening priority-wise, even as we are preparing for upcoming storms, because I am certain that many more will pass this way. Hopefully, they won't hit us. And hopefully they won't hit our family members who live next door to us, such as Grenada and St. Vincent and Barbados. Yes. But we just have to prepare and expect for that.
And as we wrap up this morning, you asked for a particular allocation from the central government in your pre-year budget presentation last week. If we do not get what we asked for this time around, what are the actions that the T.H.A. is willing to take?
Well, I mean, I think we should pray that we get what we asked for, because I think there's sound logic and reasoning behind what we asked for. Just $5.80 out of every $100 spent in the country. That's all we're asking for. But of course, beyond funding the budget from the subvention, we have looked at alternative areas of funding. We know our tax collection island won't get past $300 million. It's just beneath 300 million in terms of tax revenue estimated to be collected. We continue to look at the PPP modality. We also look at privatization of some operations so that the burden is not on the state. Foreign direct investment is now under the Office of the Chief Secretary, and we have already started vigorously trying to get foreign investments and investors into the island. We are going to go about it an orderly manner, so you won't see us just show up with an Indian businessman and say, hey, look, take him. But we are going to be transparent in our processes in how that is done for the island. That too will bring revenue. We continue to hope that we will get the export license for Stolly Park, because that will allow for exporting of the mined material out of Stolly Park, and will see us generate foreign currency, forex, as we see with Capital of Paradise, for example. TATCO should be moving to the next phase and coming closer to making a profit, or at least breaking even. So that is also in line for fiscal 2025. So I think fiscal 2025 promises to be even better than fiscal 2024. Definitely. We saw that we were able to realize a 1% growth over the last financial year to this year. And it took us a lot to get to that point. And I think in the next fiscal, we could see our growth rates increase. And that's notwithstanding the fact that when we look at the data, Trinidad and Tobago has had the lowest growth rate in the Caribbean region. In other words, we have performed the least among our brethren in the Caribbean region in terms of our economy. But notwithstanding that, I could see us growth projection for growth. The IMF and the World Bank, they continue to be concerned about our forex situation, the management of our national debt, because our debt to income ratio, that's looking less and less favorable year upon year, especially with decrease in oil and gas revenues. And our production levels have been down, especially where oil production is concerned. So that is a concern. We have not moved as quickly as we ought to in terms of diversifying the country's economy. So notwithstanding all of that that's happening at the macro level, here in Tobago on the micro level, things will look good for us. We're seeing some improvements in tourism. Certainly last fiscal year, we received far more cruise ship arrivals than we did in 2019. BA is already 8% increase in arrivals on BA over 2019. Condor is trending upwards. And in the next couple of weeks, you should hear some good news in terms of airlift where the island is concerned, because we're having some active negotiations, just awaiting some sign-off. So these are things that we can look forward to.
We look forward to that. Thank you so much, Chief Secretary, and thank you, Secretary for Finance, for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Guys, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back right after this.